closing the racial wealth gap, where my home of Atlanta, unfortunately, is the worst in the nation, is a goal that I infuse into all of my policy work, especially my work here on the Financial Services Committee. In Congress, we have to be sure that financial innovation proceeds in a way that doesn't just deliver benefits to a few, but to all, especially those most marginalized. Today, I'd like to focus on how we ensure personal consumer data is not used to reinforce racial and other biases. The discussions that we have here and the policy that we pursue will determine the level of progress that we make toward building an economy that is inclusive and fair for all. Ms. Wu, in your testimony, you mentioned that we need to be looking out for and preventing disparate impacts when it comes to data used for credit purposes. Could you elaborate on what best practices Congress can employ to make sure that we're picking up on any broad patterns of disparate impact? How can Congress be sure we're addressing any issues through legislation as needed and making sure that the CFPB and other agencies are writing appropriate and timely rules of the road?
Thank you for the question, Congresswoman Williams. Certainly, whenever big data sets are used, whether it's new data like cash flow information or old-fashioned data like credit reports, one of the things that you really want to look for is racial disparities and disparate impact. Cash flow information will never truly be able to benefit consumers of color until we get rid of overdraft abuses, because that's one of the key things that they look for in cash flows. And we know overdrafts hit minority consumers a lot harder. If you take a data set that inherently has racial disparities and you have the AI or machine learning model learn from it, it's just going to replicate it. And the problem is people think, oh, AI machine learning, there's no bias, but it is. It's all a reflection of the underlying data that's a reflection of the inequalities in our society. Unequal position of African Americans and Latinx consumers in this society was built from decades and centuries of discrimination intentionally. And we're not going to deal with those disparities until we intentionally try to address them consciously. If you just say, let's treat everyone equal, that's not equity, and that's not going to do it.
Ms. Wu, and I am out of time, Mr. Chairman, so I do have another question around technology and broadband access, but I will submit that for the record and hope that one of our esteemed panelists can get us some answers on that as we continue to move forward in this work. Thank you, and I yield back.